Perfect. Okay, because I want to hear all the stories. Um,
Cool.
so here we go. Hey, everybody. I'm John Cavelli. Welcome to my show, Trombone is Enough. I'm really excited to have Allison Cross on today. Allison, say hello.
Hello.
Allison, tell us where you're coming from, or tell us where you're calling in from.
I live in Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky. That is how I stumbled onto you. I was on a trip to Louisville a month or so ago for a music festival, Bourbon and Beyond, and I was thinking, well, if I find a trombonist in Louisville to interview, I'll bring my laptop. So I literally Google searched Louisville trombonist, and you popped right up.
Sweet. I'm not the only one, but several years
Well,
back, was I paid to be in like the Louisville Jazz Society, like thing, and I think that's what got my name pushed into Google because that's not the first time people have said that to me.
um, I'd like to find out, your story. So maybe you could just start with where you grew up, and I'm especially want to know why you picked the trombone and when that happened.
Okay. My hometown is Murray, Kentucky. It's actually a little bit closer to you, I think. Murray State is there. Let's see. I have pretty much been involved with music as the primary thing that I'm into, like maybe my whole life. I started out at 7 playing piano,
Okay.
and I was also really into like music electronics, so like cassettes and things of that sort. I would There's a way you can record onto a cassette by pulling the little tabs out of the top. So like I was really into like making my own cassettes and also pulling sounds off the speaker. Like not many people even know about those days. But at some point, I have an uncle who was in the army, and my uncle dated a woman whose son was playing trombone. I was probably like in fifth grade, so kind of in the middle of this just music experimentation stuff. And yeah, him letting me like just play his trombone, I was hooked. I pretty much just wanted to be like him. That's how I got to the trombone. But needless to say, in sixth grade, I chose it, and it has stuck with me the whole time.
Yeah, it chooses us and we choose it kind of at the same time, maybe.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Yeah, I just liked it, and that's all I can really speak on it. There wasn't really anything else going on that would draw me to it.
Was it like in band, was there a shortage of trombonists in the band or at school or anything?
No, I've been involved with programs that had plenty of trombones. Actually, when I came to college, there were a bunch of like women that were playing trombone in my freshman class, so that was really cool too. I've always found, I guess, the support has found me. To keep up with the instrument. It's just always kind of been around in the environment, so
That's
point of
that's yeah, that's
luck or
interesting.
pleasure or privilege, I guess.
Right, right. That's really cool that you had a culture of that instrument and people around you playing it. Um,
hmm
were you taking lessons or did you have a sense of wanting to get better on the instrument and how did you try to get better?
Um, well,
Or were you
that can
just
be.
were you
Mhm.
just playing for the enjoyment and that's how you get better,
Right. Well, the reality is, I didn't have people that are black that were playing trombone as leaders around me until I got to college. So in high school, I was in marching band. I took lessons during my senior year, but I didn't really take it that seriously. You know, Again, all the lessons are always given by older white men. You're not, I mean, you have to have a really nice older white man, or
Right,
you're not going to want to stick with it. So,
right.
like, yes, I'm glad that support was there. But in a sense of taking lessons to get better, I would say I wasn't really open to that type of leadership. I was playing sports, I was playing basketball, and I was running track. And I would say,
Oh, you,
so I guess that translated to the trombone because, yeah, I was in marching band. Yeah, I was auditioning to do
you were kind of
honor
breaking up.
bands and to be my thing. I was when so my senior year, um, like me talking. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you were breaking up just a little bit. So I didn't hear part of that last little bit, but
Basically, you need a nice, compassionate teacher with any
agree
instrument growth, And
for
I don't really feel like I got that type of support as far as in a teacher until I got to college,
and where did you go to college?
which is a little bit late. I went to U of L here in Louisville. So I left Murray after my senior year of high school and came here. I went to the music therapy program. So I came straight into college to start working on being a therapist. I did 2 years of lessons with Brett Schuster here at U of L. And
Okay.
then when I got here, Del Marcellus from the Marcellus family was at U of L getting a jazz performance degree. So that was a really magical connection because he's the person that put me on to the stuff that I didn't know about trombone. The New Orleans style and the Ellington style. We were playing a lot of the like he was working on Such Sweet Thunder, a remake of the Ellington Suite at the time. So that was a great experience because to get that experience from him pushed me straight over into performing in jazz bands after he left. So I was able to work in John LaBarber's big band and Jerry Tolson's big band and get some of the skills that I did not have earlier, like learning to read and learning to be an ensemble player, like in the jazz style.
That
Um,
I can't imagine what that must have been like to have Delfeo right there for you to learn alongside. I mean, that's blows my mind. So cool.
if it young looking back now, it's like, dang it, I should have taken lessons. But truly, I think with music, you just accept what's in front of you, and that's the path that you're on. Like I did not grow up listening to jazz. I did not grow up in New Orleans, so there's a huge gap in language and just aesthetic that probably would make lessons unattainable at that time. But um, being around that influence and also around the other jazz kids that were being influenced by him, like that became my home. Became the people that I would hang out with.
Do
So
you,
after I finished music therapy school, there was a round of me going back through and performing in big bands and swing bands and brass bands, doing theater and kind of getting the community experience post grad grad
right,
style. What,
right.
what are you gonna say?
Well, I was curious when you first heard that New Orleans kind of music. What do you remember when you first heard it, and what came to your mind when you experienced it? Was it like wow, or did it just kind of come like, oh yeah, this is really what music?
I don't think jazz in America. I think people that are enthusiasts of jazz recognize it as a black art form, but I don't think academia does. So it gave me the opportunity to see, like, oh, this is actually a black art form. Where I grew up, we were playing like um I guess more commercial swing material. And so
Sure,
to like, when Wynton Marsalis came to town, I was at that concert. I was like, oh, this is such a different take on the same music.
right,
Um, to
right,
hear the Lincoln Center play together, like, oh, these guys are really tight. Like, this is the most cohesive big band that I've ever heard. Like it's just a totally new interpretation of what that music can be.
Yeah.
So for Kentuckian, yeah, it's a huge deal. Really, really important to get that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about when you hear a new kind of, a new experience in music can really shape your path.
Hmm. Really, the
I,
Africanness of the music, I'd say, is the most distinct character that's kind of like missing universally. And so to like get that piece of it put back into the music is makes a world of difference.
yeah. What do you think we could do about that? I mean, I've talked with Nick Savage. How do you know? Tell me how you know Nick. But
Hmm. Hmm.
he and I play together a lot, and we're always kind of talking about what's missing, at least at the college level, about the Black culture and teaching. We're teaching part of it, but we're not teaching all of it. We're teaching one facet, but not the other. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
is that kind of something you're talking about, maybe?
I am, and I have no I'm not trying to disrespect academia, but in large, we you can't have people getting to college and having black instructors for the first time at college. You know, that's just a huge intellectual like gap where we don't intake information from older black people. So with the passing on of this music coming from older black men, it was a whole nother point of time before I came across black women that were passing on this music. So like if you look at what we allow black people to do in our society right now, I would say jazz musician is probably more esteemed for a white adult than it is for a black adult. And that is a whole conundrum that has to be pulled back apart. I met Nick Savage in a wedding band. Actually, Nick was coming to Louisville to do the wedding band, and I was recommended to be in the band by one of the Louisville musicians. So we did a couple years pre-COVID of playing weddings together,
For
and
like Diamond,
that's how I met him.
was that like Diamond Empire,
It
maybe?
is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
I've
knew he
played with
was.
a lot of those cats.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of top-notch players end up being in that group. That's really interesting what you're saying about instructors. My uh, I had three very impactful music teachers. One white instructor who taught me trombone, and my two band instructors were both black. And um, so for
Mhm.
me, I had this experience of I heard what they were saying to me, and I would listen um, as directed. We had a
Mhm.
stage
Mhm.
band. My teacher, Mr. Graves, was always getting us to play in a swing groove, and we didn't have a drummer or a bass player. We did this jazz big band stuff without drums and bass and piano. It was wind ensemble playing
Oh
these
wow.
arrangements. But he was always like stamping
Okay.
his foot when, like, if we weren't grooving, he was stamping his foot, and I was like, dude, I'm with you. Like, I get what you're saying, and it has to swing,
Right, right.
and it has to feel a
Like
certain
I
way.
feel the pocket. I promise you, I feel where the pocket is.
Right, right. It was all about the feel of it, and that got me listening in a certain way. So I think I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's meaningful. I think there is a gap in education. I don't want to diss academia at all, but you know, um, there are certain things it's not really addressing. I don't know how to
Mhm.
say
When
it,
I was
but
younger, I remember there being very specific, you know, when I was in college, we weren't talking about race and respectability politics. I'd say there's kind of a new era of language that's come about in the past 5, 10 years. But when I was in school, there were very clear race, gender, age issues going on, and nobody really had the vocabulary to like deal with it as is. But let's just say there's a lot of judgment coming upon about the way people are playing, and a lot of should, you have to do this for it to sound this way. And just in general, that coming from a privileged white voice is not going to land right, you
Totally get
know.
what you're saying. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It makes me think back to high school when my other black band teacher was, that's where I studied with Mr. Bright, and
Mhm,
we were playing music from a television. It was a TV miniseries called Roots, which was, you know, back in the late 1970s.
yeah, like Alex Haley.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Sometimes when I mention that TV show, unless people are my age, they don't know what I'm talking about. Um,
Hmm.
but we were playing the music from that television show. The television show had been on, you know, and I was at, I would say, a racially diverse high school, compared to other, situations. And,
Hmm.
I definitely was listening to what he was saying about the story behind that TV series, and it was quite intense. And um, so I hear what you're saying. I think that um, the cultural aspect of music is probably the hardest to address.
Hmm.
Everybody
Hmm.
has different experiences, but I'm curious about your choice of going into music therapy. How did that happen?
Well, I knew I wasn't going to play sports. I knew I wasn't going to be in the orchestra, and I knew I wasn't going to be an educator because my mom's an educator. And uh,
Yeah,
you know, when you grow up with a parent as a teacher, you're like, oh yeah, I'll never work in the schools.
right.
So, as far as what I had available to me, looking at U of L, I was like, music therapy seems like it's something that fits me because well, we have a background in healthcare in my family. Um, so it felt a little bit more natural than music ed did, music therapy. I didn't fully know what it would look like. I just knew it was something I was interested in, and was kind of met with a lot of really nice people. So we just made it work.
Was that a 4-year degree?
It is a 4-year degree, but I took off a year and then I did my internship over there's a 6-month long internship that's required at the end. And I
Hmm.
did my internship over like September to March. So that's like another like 2 semesters. Um, so I say that to say I took the extended program
Right.
route and ended up with a 4-year degree. Yes.
I see.
At
Did
this
you go?
point, I've practiced music therapy for about 14 or 15 years. So I've
Wow.
practiced more than I studied at this point, you know.
Okay. Wow. Did you go right into the practice then? Right after?
Yeah, yeah. I took over someone's caseload up in between Indianapolis and Cincinnati. There's a city called Batesville that sits right on the interstate. And
Okay.
I took over someone's caseload in Batesville. And so I was commuting up there a couple days a week and then performing in Louisville on the weekends. And I did that kind of swing shift schedule for probably 6 or 7 years before I left Batesville and was back in Louisville full time and started. I inherited a company I was working for, so that company turned into my own company, and I've been
Wow.
able to build back out the process of training people and hiring. Last year at this time, so like COVID was COVID, and then coming out of that, it was kind of a mash of wedding gigs, DJ gigs, music therapy hours, and a little bit of supervision
Yeah.
with. leads to burnout really quickly.
I'm
And
sure.
so I started to apply for administrative jobs, and I picked up a job with the orchestra, actually, Louisville Orchestra.
Okay.
My role here is local partnerships management. So I'm finding places to book musicians in the city. I
Oh,
produce their library series and am booking musicians like at the nursing home and uh, different stuff like that. So it, in a weird way, my job, I have two management jobs, and they both require that kind of looking at the community about what's going on and putting music in places where people are not getting access. So I'll say all this to say, a few years ago, I started coming out of COVID. I was able to get my foot in the door with some diversity initiatives in the gentrified neighborhood, and was basically like, y'all need to be like, this is a neighborhood where you're clearly not prioritizing having Black businesses. Let's book musicians out here, but let's make sure Black jazz musicians are getting paid. And so the past few years, I've been able to basically uh, people with money, like, do you want to sponsor this thing? They're like, yes. I'm like, musicians, do you want to play this thing? They're like, yes. Like, psh, psh, connect the two and create a
perfect.
spot where Black jazz bands are able to still perform in public. Because the other thing that happened after COVID is the jazz clubs got closed down and the Black musicians stopped being hired to play, period, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably going to continue to happen. So it's neat to be at a spot where there's enough visibility and like people understand like what I'm about to be able to do things like that, whether it's with classical music, whether it's music with, music therapy or with jazz. At this point, they're all kind of cycling back into each other, and the work is not as different as it is on paper.
Right. Music is life and life is music and everybody needs.
Yeah, at the end of the day, access is the bigger issue.
Yeah. What were the caseloads like that you inherited, and was that different experience from your internship?
hmm So my internship was not normal. I went to a psych hospital outside of Baltimore, and kind of more what I'm doing now. But after I left Maryland, I did. Hold on, just a moment. I'm gonna go up this elevator.
Oh, okay.
My office is down the street from where I live, so the benefit of
Oh,
having that is I don't have to have an office at home. I just stop by here and make the downtown office kind of my stopping point. So when
that's
I was
nice.
working in Maryland, it was one of those old institutions where people used to live and work. If you had a psych disorder, and like early efforts at being humanitarian, which we found out why that didn't work. But at this hospital, there is art therapy, music therapy, dance, and we all co-treated together. Really kind of a really great model. Um, they are, due to the size of crime in Baltimore, what was starting to happen, and it's kind of happened all over the country now, is that psych hospitals are taking on forensic patients, which
Mm.
changes the landscape of psych.
Mm.
So there was a strong need to be kind of like trauma informed and have good boundaries, and
Okay.
I gain a lot of the skills that actually I utilize now in my private practice. Um, being interested in prison reform and things like that. Some of those ideals came out of working in psych in Maryland. So after the psych job, I did the Batesville caseload that I mentioned already,
Right.
and that was working on a waiver. So everybody in the state of Indiana, if you have a disability, you can be reimbursed for music therapy services as a provider.
Wow.
So I was working with community members, people that had graduated high school up until adult ages, their goal was to like habilitate to the community. So there wasn't a specific injury. These are people with disabilities that are looking to have the skills to be in the community. Um, I worked on teams with the case manager, the parents, and whatever other therapists were there, and some really great families. Honestly, the reason that they have that Medicaid waiver is parents insisted on having it. So again,
Sounds
I
amazing.
hmm what I've learned about music therapy is you pick up the skills that the people you're working with need. So
Ah,
like,
okay.
you get I got a specific skill set working in Maryland, and then it kind of changed a little bit working in Indiana. And then after I had that job, I moved to Louisville, started my own company. So now I'm like, how do I get paid to do this work? Everything I do is private pay. So I'm working with medically fragile families. I'm going to the psych hospital because there's an activity need there. The autism school. I'm working with like home incarcerated teens.
Mm.
I'm working with a teen girl self esteem group. So it kind of looks different. You have to be a little bit better at pinpointing like what does this smaller community of people need and how can music fit that need. Even if it's not straight music therapy, there's usually a way to like bring music to them in a way that they want to be involved with.
And is that like helping them listen to music, or are they creating with an instrument, or both, or
There's a little bit of both. They are generally not trained in music already, and the goals are non-music in nature. So, like better communication skills, or if someone's had a stroke, there's probably a language and a motor deficit. Or if you're a kid that has an IEP, there's like an educational and a cognitive goal. So motor skills, cognitive skills, and emotion, social emotional goals are kind of how it ends up landing in the public.
can you describe the feeling you get when you have, like, if there's a breakthrough or a
Mm-mm. You know, by and large, people do their own work, and there's a lot of like patience and spirituality with being with people, even if they're not having a breakthrough. A lot of really great small moments where you know that that is contributing to a bigger issue. But I think the idea of there being breakthrough moments and people are crying and their life has changed forever is kind of cliche,
okay. So
especially
that's
after
like
COVID.
Hollywood.
Yeah, a little bit. If if you're like, you know, just in general struggling with things, it kind of takes a lot to pull yourself back up to where your baseline normally is. So the
Right.
idea that you would pull yourself up from being sick all the way up past your own baseline is like, a little bit pull yourself up from your bootstraps ish. Like that doesn't really happen. Even in
Yeah.
the medical hospital, if somebody is it's sick enough to be hospitalized, you're unlikely to see that big drastic change in the course of a day or two.
Right. Right.
Sometimes you see it with people that are dying, but they die after.
Uh,
Like it's not actually something that human that like uh very well regulated, healthy, getting back to normal thing. That's not really what humans do. So I say that to say it's a lot of small incremental stories where we're respecting people moment by moment and allowing their more hidden stories of trauma to come out and be respected. These teens that are on home incarceration, they're not but 13 to 16 years old. They don't even have that much life experience. Like they don't even know how to figure out what's wrong with them.
right.
So the bigger issue is when they're being a hot mess, you can still be patient and be like, uh, I see what you're doing, friend, but how does that how does that work towards the bigger goal of things? And having the rapport to go back and forth with those vulnerable and sensitive topics, I think is
Right.
more on brand about what's happening.
Yeah. I know from being an adult in therapy, I don't know what my problem is until my therapist gets me to talk about it, and then you know,
Did you notice this pattern that you've been doing for a really long time, but you never actually talk about the pattern? Like,
right,
no, I didn't know that. Like, people actually don't
right,
know.
right. Yeah, there's no way I knew. If I knew, I
Mm-mm.
wouldn't be sitting here. Um,
Hmm.
but I know that can
And,
take a long time, you know.
and that's the beauty and the curse of this thing that we call therapy. You know, some people can approach it in a healthy way, and some people are not going to approach it in a healthy way and kind of be fearful of it. So you
Oh,
just
right. Yeah.
deal with you just deal with people where they're at. And me, going back to the age, race, gender things, you know, people don't really have good models of Black women who are there to do therapy with them. So
Mm,
there's another layer of like, oh, I'm not here to judge you. Like, I truly am having a professional friendship
right.
and can only do with that what is permissible in the within the boundaries of our relationship. You know, I
Yeah.
really can't demand things from people or make them do things. I can't even actually give homework very easily. It's very
Right.
much so being with people when they're with me, which oftentimes is not their best time. If they're being having to come to therapy, then the time when they are spending with the therapist is definitely not their best
And and
emotionally or whatever.
are there also instances where you might only be seeing this person once or twice and then you don't see them again, so you don't get to develop?
Yeah, mhm. I'd say like music therapy in the medical setting is very much so like that. You have a very, very short window of being present and available, and then it just kind of goes away.
Right.
I tend to work with people for like years, like 4 or 5 or 8 years.
Oh,
So where I'm at now, I see actually a lot of really great transformative things, but it happens in really small increments.
when you first learned that music could help in this therapeutic way, was that I mean, I knew you had a background. You said your family had a healthcare background.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but did you know all along as a child that music could be a part of that, or was there like a discovery and you know what
No, I didn't know.
so when you
You just kind of fake
discovered
it till
that,
you make it, you know.
okay, yeah, I have always thought about music therapy, and I've never got to talk with someone that's doing it and has done it
Hmm.
for so
Hmm.
long. So like I'm really thankful that you said yes to this interview because frankly, I was intrigued. I saw that you had a
Thank you.
practice. I think it's amazing, and just to learn about what you're doing is just I'm amazed at music in general. I think
Hmm.
music itself, there's something magic that happens when music hits our brain. I have a show I'm preparing for, and the vocalist and I were just talking. I did a series of discussions with her and posted them on YouTube. And in one of them, we talk about the emotional uh, effects that certain songs have on us. And, there's this, uh, although we were probably talking about something and the thing cut us off. Do you happen to remember anything about maybe what you were saying or?
Yeah, you had asked, you know, are there any big picture moments? And I was like, oh, that's not really how it works. It's more
Oh, yeah.
small or increments. And
Yeah.
you're like, you know, you had said something about your experience of being in therapy. And I'm like, yeah, that, you know, that's why it's either heavily embraced or kind of like shied away from. And that's kind of the last thing that I remember talking about.
Yeah. That's interesting. Because as you're talking about music therapy, I'm thinking about what you're saying, plus me being in therapy and how that can go. Sometimes it can take a while, a lot of sessions, to learn something or to get something cracked open to look at it. And I was wondering, if sometimes you have a client engagement that only like can go 1 or 2 sessions because of some kind of constraint. Does that ever happen? You were saying, I think we were talking about this, and you were saying that you have a lot of long-term clients now.
Hmm.
Did you
Yeah,
have, were short-term clients ever an issue or part of your caseload in the early days or anything?
yeah. I feel like with short-term clients, say you get like 6 hours. I feel like you can use that whole 6 hours, even if you go once a week for an hour at a time. You can use that whole 6 hours just trying to figure out what's going on.
Mm.
So the benefit of having somebody that's more long term is that their willingness to be vulnerable kind of increases over time. In the best case scenario, it's somebody that's like, listen, this is what's going on, and let's just jump 2 feet into it. And that's easy because there are like less walls to take down.
Yeah.
But on the other end, I will say music has the benefit of being non-confrontational. So if they don't want to talk, you can just sing songs. You can make a playlist. Like there's so many other things that you can do to use up the time in a productive way, even if it's not playing or getting them to actively engage in something that's vulnerable.
So so
Um,
so sometimes if they're not engaging, you just say, "Well, hey, we're going to listen to some jams."
well, yeah, every day is not like surgery day. Sometimes you got to
Okay.
do
Yeah.
maintenance. Sometimes you
Yeah.
got to like I remember you talking about this before. Will you give me some more information? Like, we are truly like not robots. Like, it is not possible to just know on either end. Like, somebody has to disclose, whether it's me, whether it's me picking and prodding and asking questions, or them kind of like telling a story about something that affects them. And you know, somebody has to put their foot in the water.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So when something does open up, how does it look then? How does a session proceed, and how is music used in that? You know,
Hmm.
how's it used? Like, I'm just so curious now.
So there's uh like lyric analysis. You can design a way to, maybe there's a song that kind of comes back for them. So you can take a day where you very scientifically take apart that song and talk about the
Mm.
underlying meaning. And a lot of times that will give you kind of that in way, like, oh, okay, this is the problem then.
Ah, wow.
Kind of turn that person into a songwriter a little bit, whether it's their song or not. What do
Okay.
you think this person is feeling? And like, you can kind of um, approach things in a third person way so that they are allowed to talk about what's going on or their perception of what's going on of the song or whatever without it being like, I think this. Like, if you just kind of, there's a certain point where music is the third person. So if you just call it or he or she or them, or, if you give it that third person character and talk about the whole metaphor in that with that third person character, then it kind of works out.
Yeah.
I'd
What's
say
like
that is the
what's
benefit that music offers that, for example, talk therapy doesn't offer.
right?
Like to
Like,
have a third party entity that is actually music, how they do music.
yeah, like what's she talking about right there in that line, or
Yes.
what's he trying to express there?
What do you,
Um,
sometimes you can't even be that fancy. What do you think is going
oh,
on? How are they
ah,
feeling right now?
okay,
How
got
how is the how is Katy Perry feeling in this line right here with everything
yeah,
that we know?
right, right. Like her album, I think it's called Clown. Um, is that her um recent album where she talks a lot about her mental struggles?
I don't know, but good. That's good to know.
Yeah, I saw the album cover and was like, "Oh my God, wow, what's that album about?" And I read articles about it, and was like, oh, okay, that's pretty amazing.
To
Um,
your point, I mean, celebrities in general have to go such a long way in their personality to like have success. Think about like The Weekend. He talks about it so openly about how eventually you turn into your entertainment personality, and it's like your life, like you
yeah,
lose who you actually are in that career.
yeah. I
So
was just listening to Jeanette McCurdy's new podcast. Do you know Jeanette McCurdy?
mm-mm.
Do you remember the TV show called iCarly? It was
Oh
like a
yeah, okay.
Nickelodeon show. My kids watched it, so I watched it with them. So
Hmm.
I guess I got older while my kids grew up watching iCarly, and so I was listening to my favorite podcast. It's Mark Maron, WTF, and he was interviewing Jeanette McCurdy, who put a book out a year or two ago called "I'm Glad My Mother Died." Um,
Mm,
it's all about her upbringing with this completely mentally disturbed mother, um, and her eating disorder and all this stuff. So they were talking about all this in the interview, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I need to listen to her podcast. So she just started a podcast, so
hmm.
I'm listening to it, and she totally had a bizarre childhood that you wouldn't guess from a celebrity, uh, a child actress. I mean, knowing what we already know about them,
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's probably a lot like other stories, but it was kind of unlike any story I'd heard. I was just mind my mind was blown about what she had to get through. But
Hmm.
anyway, like let's see, how did we get to this? Oh, just talking about celebrities. So when a celebrity like Katy Perry decides she's going to make an album, a record album of music about her mental health struggles, like, what do we think about that? Is that a good use of her, or is that self-indulgent? Like, how do we go with that? I don't know.
Yeah. The the issue of mainstream music and the celebrity, it has been a long uh conflicting point for me. So much that I'm not gonna lie. When I'm working with somebody, I honestly try to avoid mainstream uh people and songs as much as possible. I went through a phase where I was producing music, and through that I was like, the best thing people can do is be making their own music as art, same as visual as what you would do as a visual art. Like, make your songs, consume those songs, know them deeply, and write more songs. I feel like that is the best path for most people.
Hmm.
Not to say that the celebrity can't be helpful, but again,
Hmm.
it's always going to be a third party situation that doesn't exactly match up to anybody in real life. You can only
Yeah.
take snippets of that and encourage people to like discern what mental health is,
Yeah.
whatever the situation is. Like, okay, you know, 10, 15 years ago, all celebrities were doing some messy stuff. Like, I, yeah, that's a really interesting talking point, and it's always been kind of a weird issue personally
Yeah.
to wade through.
Yeah. So do you actually have your patients then sort of writing their own lyrics out at some point to really get their own thoughts out there?
People that are into songwriting are already doing it,
Ah, okay. They've
or
already
you can,
written
yeah, they already
poetry.
have notebooks and notebooks of just stuff, and you can ask them, oh, why don't you bring something that you really like and share it? And that's kind of a safe way to like look at their content without seeing too much of their content. Like,
That's
I don't need to
interesting.
read the whole notebook. Definitely not.
You
But like,
probably get a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
from a sample, right?
too much from a sample. I'm like, just
Yeah.
pick one.
Yeah. I found a big satchel of all the poetry and song lyrics I wrote my senior year in high school, and it was just so awful. Um,
Right,
but I
seriously.
was but I was going through a really rough time. I mean, so at least I was doing that. I wasn't like cutting or I
Oh,
hadn't yet,
absolutely.
I hadn't yet embarked on my drug and alcohol career, which I'm 10
Right.
years sober from. I just had 10 years a couple of days ago, and I've been reflecting.
Fantastic.
Well, it's like my sponsor says, good job, but it's you're living like you should have been living before. So just keep up the work.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
it's
nice.
still a daily thing.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It's great. Yeah, it's great to say, well, I can do this. Other people can do this. I like to tell people about it because, if they're struggling, there is a solution. There's a lot of them.
Mhm.
Um, but in high school, I hadn't yet gotten into stuff as badly. So I, was just sitting in all my classes writing awful lyrics to songs, and not awful like mean or anything, just awfully self-pityful stuff. But
Yeah.
uh, is that when you see notebooks, and do you have to ask a lot of times before they'll share it with you, or are they openly giving about sharing their personal notebooks and stuff?
I'm a pretty safe person, I would say. I'm pretty non-judgmental and like set that boundary from the beginning. Like, oh, I'm definitely not going to be judging you. Definitely not going to be like bringing up things from the past to like guilt you into something. So you should know that up front. And if you're feeling that way about me, then it's easier for you just to bring that to me, knowing that I've already told you that's not what my intent is. So people that can understand all that, no, there's no issue with them bringing their notebook. They're like, here, let's make a song. They're very, very
Yeah.
much a co-creator in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like I said
So,
yesterday, people are all absolutely down to do their own work. I think a lot of people just need direction about what kind of work they need to be doing. But like most people can do that stuff on their own. Or I think therapy is good for like getting it kickstarted and getting a good pattern going.
okay.
But a lot of people are able to like pick up those habits on their own after a while and feel really good about it, and
Huh.
just touch in when they need to.
Yeah. What age
There's some folks.
groups?
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
you asked what I was going to say. When I was working up in Indiana, everybody that I worked with was like either at the end of high school or right after high school, getting in kind of to young adulthood. And I was in the same age range. And there's
Wow.
a couple of guys from that era that are still friends with me on Facebook. And you can see that like they still live where they were living. They still have the same issue. They still have their parents, parental issues and community issues, but like the way they handle it is much better and much healthier. And their ability to, for instance, like your ability to get on Facebook and post, yeah, I had a bad day, but blah, 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 is pretty healthy. They find ways to kind of regulate themselves out instead of like bottling it up so much where they explode every 6 months or something.
Yeah.
They travel and they
Yeah.
paint
That
and pick up new
wanting to
hobbies
engage
and
on social media and trying to pull yourself out of isolation, you're looking for interaction, even if it's one way. You're posting something that might be personal.
Mhm.
Um,
I think it's always
Probably
good,
takes some courage.
absolutely. The healthy type of courage. Well, if and it's easy because they typed it. So
Um,
if it is self-deprecating, then
let's
it's like,
see.
oh, that doesn't look good.
I lost my thought when I started talking. That happens a lot in my old age. um,
Same.
what sort of what did academics look like for you studying music therapy? I mean, it must be all, is it a lot of psychology and some music? Like how do they make those connections in school? I'm wondering.
Yeah. So did you go to music school?
I was talking and you didn't answer. I'm like, oh wow, did I piss her off or what did I
Mm-mm,
just
mm-mm.
say? Like I couldn't even remember what I said.
So you're asking about the curriculum.
Oh, thank you. But before that, did you get my point, like about posting on Facebook, and what did
Mhm.
you think about what I said? Do you think it takes courage to post something personal or do
Yeah,
you think it's
absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely.
I was
Absolutely.
wondering how, yeah, okay. I didn't know if I was sometimes when I see a post from someone on Facebook and it's really personal, um, sometimes I'm conflicted inside. I don't even know if I can describe why. Maybe I'm just uncomfortable because I feel them and I'm
Hmm.
empathetic.
Hmm.
Maybe that
Right,
makes
right.
me uncomfortable and thinking things like judging just the act of sharing something personal. Like, oh, I'd never do that, even though I'd love to all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I'm uncomfortable, I get all these other things start to fire that aren't really it's I'm not really a judgmental person. I just get that way when I'm uncomfortable about something else.
I think a
I
lot of people are like that. You know,
you think?
that's the whole task of like being aware of what your inner voice is and what it's telling you and where it comes from. You know, I think that probably something everybody deals with.
Ah, yeah.
Um,
Well,
but as
it's good
far
to
as
know.
I'd say, yeah, I would, from my point of view, I'd rather somebody post what's going on than isolate. And you're like, I wonder where this person has been when they're clearly going through a bad time, you know?
Yeah.
And then the curriculum, what I was
Yeah.
asking if you went to music school.
Yes, I studied I got a jazz degree.
Mhm.
I came here in St. Louis. I came to St. Louis in 1983 uh, and studied jazz performance at Webster University for got my 4 year degree, and then I did 2 years of master's degree work um, before I dropped out to tour with a rock band. So um,
Sweet.
yeah, so about 6 years of school, and then been I've been playing music in the area, all different types since then. I went back to school later in life and got master's in finance and an MBA, but music has always been my main,
Amazing.
well,
Hmm.
my main occupation in my head and my heart.
Hmm.
Um,
No, I've
so,
only gone to one music school. I think for the most part, everybody's taking the same classes during the first 2 years: theory, history, your gen eds, your private lessons, and your major ensembles.
oh,
And
okay.
then for the second 2 years, for us, it changes. So you've got theory and practice of music therapy. Where does it come from? And like, who are the founding fathers? Abnormal psych. You know, what does it look like to have a disorder? There's a like physics of music class where you learn about the inner ear and the brain and the way that music is actually processed.
Whoa.
Um, there's a special, like, I took mine through the education department, like a special ed, like if you were to be a teacher working a special ed class, you have to take that. So like, exceptional kids learn about all the disabilities. When I was in school, autism was kind of growing. So there was a lot of extra stuff about what it was like to work with folks on the spectrum because it was such a new diagnosis.
Yeah.
And people are so different. Like there's not any like standard thing that they do. They're just kind of all over the place with how it presents clinically. And then,
Has
mhm,
no, go ahead. I
research, music therapy research. I had to design a study. And then principles and practices is where you do all your clinical work. So there's like probably semesters of working in the community alongside a music therapist, like 12 or 13 weeks. And then at the end of 4 years, like after you get done with your 4 years of classes, there's a 6 month long internship. So that should be done right after coursework because you're kind of applying everything that you just learned, but with one or two specific populations. My company is doing, spectrum folks, psych, adolescents and children, and developmental, like early kids. And I'd say the developmental stuff kind of generalizes into both of those other categories. But when you get older, the reason that spectrum folks and psych folks are looped together is because music kind of plays a similar role. And that is kind of how it's like sectioned off. Like
mhm.
medical music therapy looks different than mental health music therapy, which looks different than education, which looks different than corrections. They all have a little bit different of a focus.
Whoa. So you just blew my mind there. Medical music therapy versus mental music therapy?
Like what it looks
What?
like in this.
Oh,
There's completely different, it's totally
huh?
different approaches.
Whoa.
Even
Is
though
there any way to,
there are things that overlap, and you need a little of each to know about the other. I have a lot of experience with medical stuff. I used to work in a hospital,
is there
so
any way, is there any way for you to briefly describe those two different things and then also how they overlap?
in the medical hospital, pain perception is probably number one on the list.
Oh,
And
this is incredible.
when when your body is letting off a lot of cortisol, you don't heal. You heal a lot slower. So you need
Okay.
your cortisol down. You need your respiration up. And then, like there's certain specific things. Like when you sing, you salivate a different type of way. When your respiration is good, then your blood levels are different. So there's all these like micro things that you can manipulate to get a person like just at a better baseline. Like give them their preferred music so they are in a good mood. Turn off the TV so they're not anxious. Like make sure they're getting their sleep together. If their sleep's not together, then none of this is going to work. And I
Wow.
would say all those things actually match are the same in psych, but in psych we don't treat the body at all, not the same way. Because a lot of time psych disorders come with these extreme behaviors that you have to deal with first. So like especially with kids, uh you have to deal with the behavior first at the psych hospital, basically. Stop the cutting. Like get them
Right.
in a controlled substance a situation so their substance abuse is like not as high.
Right.
If it's a kid and they're abusing alcohol, like that's gonna cause a lot of body problems. And then you're medicating them, so you got to make sure that they're on their meds and make sure they have a healthy relationship with like, yeah, this is something that you need. And then when people in the psych hospital feel better, they like don't believe that they're sick any longer, and so their tendency to lose all the healthy habits they set up is like really really high.
Yeah.
I would say hygiene is the first thing to go, whether it's physical or mental hygiene. Like, and it's probably not that way at at the medical hospital. I'd say you can be significantly sick and still be keeping after your hygiene and stuff.
Hmm. Okay. That's
That's
interesting.
just my perception.
Yeah.
So yeah, the kind of like order of operations is really really different.
Okay. Yeah. I hadn't really even, well, this whole conversation is
Right, right.
awesome for
We are no
me.
longer talking about the trombone. We are like down in the
Right.
woods somewhere.
Well, I love this because when I think about the trombone, I think, okay, well, if it weren't for the trombone, I would not um, be married to my wife.
Mhm.
Um, and that's pretty big. So thank you, trombone. Thank you, whatever that vision was. I'll never forget that night when I was laying in bed looking at the ceiling and it came to my mind, you need to play trombone. And I was 8 years old. There's
Right,
like
right, exactly.
no reason for me to pick the trombone. It came to me.
Same, same,
I mean,
same.
it's so bizarre. And someone asked me that, like, it's probably 5 years into sobriety, and someone in my home group meeting said, "What made you choose the trombone?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I remember the exact moment, and I described it. He's like, "Oh, that was a God thing," and I'm like, "Oh my God, that was a God thing." There's absolutely no reason why I would have chosen it, and people along the way have said, "Oh, you just chose the wrong instrument or whatever." But um, that's so funny that you also it came to you, and
Yeah.
but now here we are talking about music therapy, and I had no clue about music therapy, even though I've heard about this career for years and years. I've never asked
Mhm.
anybody about it, like specifically. And then now just to learn that there's medical music therapy and mental music therapy. And I think you even said a couple of others.
Oh
Or
yeah, like music therapy in the school setting, like
oh, schools
working.
and correctional, like
Yeah,
whoa,
yeah.
correctional institutions. Oh,
Hmm. There's
wow.
a lot of different stuff
Which
going on.
yeah, when you said correctional, I was like, oh my God, going into prisons and working with people in a music therapy type setting is like that. Have you, and you've done that,
Well,
or not much?
I'm working with home incarcerated youth right now,
Oh,
so
that's right.
kind of
Yeah, you
yes,
said that. Yeah.
but
Okay.
jails are different. Jails are a lot like psych hospitals, to be honest with you.
They're like what? I couldn't hear that word.
They're a lot like psych hospitals,
Oh, psych hospitals. Okay. Uh,
as in
that's
everything is locked. It's there's a lot of crossover in those two populations.
okay. That's kind of what I imagined, I think, uh, in a impulsive way when you said correctional. I thought psych.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
okay.
a lot of people that will end up in corrections utilized behavior or other type of supports when they were younger.
Wow. Yeah. Um, man, this is so cool. I'm just like my mind is expanding by the moment. Um, you are currently like full caseload, work full time, like
Oh no, not me.
no?
I'm trying
Oh,
not to be full time again ever.
oh, okay.
um,
I
so
mean,
I'm with the orchestra. It's a 40-hour job week, but I'm usually up there maybe 2 or 3 hours a day at the office I'll spend. And then I'm probably only working probably less than 5 sessions a week, music
oh,
therapy wise, but most of that is me being with the person that's in the internship right now. She
okay,
gets done in December, so I'm hoping in December I'll be able to give away at least a couple more of those hours,
I see. How do you
and
how do you
likely
make
take on
sure?
another student. Hmm.
Okay, how do you make sure that you are taking care of yourself when you're working with people with these problems? Is there an issue there, or are you just like how does that affect
Um,
you? I'm just curious.
I've learned to take breaks more frequently, and there's a really heavy kind of planning aspect. You need to be able to think about what you're going to do with people and troubleshoot about what might happen before you get there. And a lot
Mhm.
of times that's where the exhaustion comes in. So if I don't feel like I can show up and do a good session with people, I will just cancel it.
Mm.
And I think that's, more responsible than wasting people's time. um,
Yeah.
but at this point, I'm kind of out of that. I have enough stuff in my back pocket, and
Mm.
I really like the people I work with, and I'm motivated about seeing what's going on with them every week.
Yeah.
To be kind of a dork about it, like, but these teenagers are hilarious, and I don't actually want to miss a week because you miss. It feels like 2 months that you're missing, and they're just so charismatic. And like we go to a preschool. When I was going
Yeah.
to the preschool every day, it took a lot of work for me to like, okay, you don't have to go here every day. Just go here 2 days a week. And now I'm
Right.
like, you don't have to go there at all, but I still pop in and check on them. Like, I um I think part of the healthy balance, when you first start practicing anything, you kind of just have to take what you can get, but over time you can take more of what you want to do and
Sure.
not have to take on hours that you don't really like. So
Yeah.
the benefit that I have right now is that I'm pretty much only taking on stuff that I want to do, only working with people that I want to. And
Yeah.
if I don't, I'm
That's
like, oh, I don't have any openings. Just go get somebody else.
right.
Like, how would they know?
Yeah, they wouldn't know. Right. Right. They're not gonna. Well,
um,
I see an indication that we're running out of time, and I don't want us to get clipped off again. So, um, why don't I just take this opportunity to wrap us up? Um,
Thanks so much for reaching out. This has been really like fun and light. I didn't know what to expect at all, but I appreciate you being interested in me and music therapy.
no, I have to thank you. I mean, here's this weirdo from St. Louis reaching out. I mean, I was like emailing, I was, trying all these angles. And
The
then,
Louisville Academy of Music told me that you were reaching out. I was like, how do they know?
yeah. And then I saw, oh my gosh, she's friends with Nick Savage. And then you saw Nick in one of my
Mhm.
group postings and you said Nick. And I was like, Nick's my ticket.
Right. We're in.
I can't thank you enough, Allison, for your time. And this conversation has been great. And so thanks again. This is the show is called Trombone is Enough. Please
Okay.
subscribe. You will hear lots of great conversations with trombonists. So thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Great. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay.
I'll send you, I don't know how many trombone players in Louisville you know, but I have a short list of folks that you might want to talk to.
Absolutely. I'm looking for people to interview. So
Awesome.
thanks.
Well,
Okay.
take care.
You too.